Hi, I'm Dr. Maxine Bryant, and I am your virtual professor. Happy February! So, February is known as Black History Month. And so, this month, what I thought I'd do is take a break from talking about issues that are plaguing our country, contemporary issues such as impeachment, the wall, things like that, and really focus on celebrating Black history. Now, too often, when we think about Black history, we think about slavery, we think about Reconstruction, we think about Jim Crow, and all of that. But that's not where Black history begins. And so I want to spend some time with you today dispelling the myths. If I could have a title for today's workshop or today's session, that's what I would call it: dismantling or dispelling the myths. Now, in her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, Dr. Joy DeGruy opens up with the story about a greeting exchange between the warriors of the Maasai tribe in Africa. And when they would greet one another, one would say, Kasarian Ingiria, Kasarian Ingiria. And what that means is, how are the children? And the expected response, and the often response, is the children are well. Now, why would they greet one another this way? Well, if the children are well, that means everything is going well in the tribe or in the region. The adults are cared for, the women are cared for, there's food, there's shelter, there's peace, there's trade, so the economy is well, all is well. Can we say that about our children today? Are African American children well? I dare say not. One of the reasons they're not well is because they don't know their history. They don't know who they are. And the same can be said for many of us as adults. We don't know who we are. And so I thought in this session of the Virtual Professor, I would start at the beginning, right? It's been said that Africans were not civilized and that Europeans had to come in and civilize these savages or these heathens, so to speak. I beg to differ. You see, whenever a people have a spoken language, they have a written language, they have rules to live by, which is government, they have a way to provide food and shelter for the group, they have an agreed way of living, which is culture, they have a religion and a type of economic trade, and you have civilization. Africans were civilized. So I'm going to start with the civilization of Kemet. You know it as Egypt. Now, the population of ancient Egypt was actually comprised of Africans who lived in the southern region of the continent, and they traveled northward up the Nile River. Now, the Nile River is one of only two rivers that flows northward. So the Africans in the southern region of the continent followed the Nile River upward. And these ancestors are called the Nilotic people. And as they followed the Nile River northward, they brought their cultural traditions with them. And those cultural traditions continued to evolve with each successive migration. Now, the Black people who landed in Egypt referred to their land as Kemet. It's called Black. And they called themselves Kemio, and that literally means the Blacks. So both the Kemius and the Nubians, many of you have heard of the term Nubians, were people who created roads, cities, temples, all of that, as early as 3800 BC, right? And so this ancient people were definitely a civilized entity. I had the opportunity to travel to Egypt some years ago, and I saw how ancient Egyptians painted themselves, and they made sure that whoever was going to look at those pictures generations, years, thousands of years later would know that they were Black people with dreadlocks. They had locks, right? They didn't have smooth hair, like Cleopatra in the movies. No, that's fake. That's fake news, right? Now, no nation in the history of civilization has had a greater influence on the arts and the sciences than Kemet. Kemet is the birthplace of literature, and it's the cradle of the arts and the sciences. We get our calendar, the original calendar, and I had an opportunity to see this when I was in Egypt, from the ancient Egyptians. Astrology, they were masters of studying the sun and the moon, and that's how they developed their very accurate calendar. Medicine came from Kemet. Imhotep is the earliest known physician ever, period. A black man, right? The solar boat, I got a chance to see that in Memphis, in Egypt, the Solar Boat Museum. It was a boat, very large. It was 132 feet. It weighed 35 tons, and it was comprised of 1,224 pieces of wood. They used Lebanese cedar wood. And listen, remember, they didn't have nails, right? They didn't have the tools that we have now. Those 1,224 pieces of wood were literally sewn together with rope. And it's water soluble. It can sail, right? If it were put in the water right now, it could sail. These were mastermind people. And somewhere along the line, we believe the lie that we are not smart enough to do math and science and chemistry and biology and all of that. And so many of our African-American children are diverted to other fields. We came from intelligence. We came from royalty. We came from people whose masterminds still mystify people today. I got a chance to walk in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid. I got a chance to touch the Sphinx, right? And can you imagine the high level of intelligence it took to develop those things? And contrary to some popular belief, the pyramids, for example, were not constructed by Hebrew slaves. No, they were constructed by Black folks, Egyptians. Many of the archaeological wonders of the world are in Egypt. I had a chance not only to visit the pyramids, but also to visit several of the temples. But one temple in particular that I want to tell you about today was called the Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel. It was actually built into a rock cliff. Right? They built this temple into a rock cliff. It's very grand. It's very tall. I look like a miniature ant next to it, right? And here's the thing. Twice a year, the sun can shine directly into the back of the temple where the Holy of Holies is, right? Twice a year. Who does that? Who designs a temple so precise that twice a year the sun shines directly through everything? There are no windows in this temple, okay? But somehow they constructed it so that precisely on February the 21st and October the 21st, the sun shines directly and illuminates the Holy of Holies. And those 2 days are thought to be the birth date and the coronation date of Ramses, who was one of the great kings and pharaohs of those times. Have you ever walked down the street and you see porches on the houses? The idea of porches, which were called verandas, came from the Egyptians, from the Kemet, from Black folks. We were mastermind. As a matter of fact, and we'll talk about this a little later in our next session for February, anyone who is living in contemporary America, the United States of America, who is African American, you need to realize that you are descendants of the greatest of the greatest of the great. Think about it. The Europeans didn't take the weaklings from Africa. They took the strongest, because they knew what they were going to have to endure. And if you are African American today and you are alive, at least one of your ancestors made it through the tortures and the horrors of being held in the slave castles. At least one of your ancestors made it through the Middle Passage. At least one of your ancestors lived through slavery. At least one of your ancestors made it through construction, lived through Jim Crow. We have to think more highly of ourselves. And so, as you celebrate and recognize and honor and commemorate the rest of Black History Month, I hope you will remember that if you are Black and in America, or any other place actually in the whole world, you come from strong stock. You need to celebrate that. I'm a firm believer that if our young people knew half of their history accurately, they would have a different perception of themselves. They would see themselves differently and would realize that they are sons and daughters of royalty. And so you would be, I think, less likely to take out another royalty, and you would see the royalty in yourself. That's enough for now. As you can see, I get quite excited about this topic. I'm excited about February 2020, and I hope that you are too, and I hope you take time to learn and to read about African American history, not just if you're Black, regardless of what your ethnicity is. We all can stand to recognize the contribution of Africans in American civilization, and not just American civilization, in the world. Well, that's it for now. This is Dr. Maxine Bryan. I am your virtual professor. I am changing society one class at a time. Have a good day.